we have got to stop asking corporations to save us. Somewhere along the way, we developed this strange habit of demanding that corporations become our moral leaders. We tend to look at CEOs as grand arbiters of change, looking to them for solutions to problems well outside their purview. I say that because corporations are not fundamentally social engines. They're built to serve customers and deliver returns to their shareholders. That's not me being a cynic. That's their structure. And this reflects the bedrock principle of shareholder primacy, famously championed by economist Milton Friedman. The idea that a company's primary duty is to maximize profits for its owners. Now, in recent years, there's been a competing philosophy that has gained significant traction. Stakeholder theory, popularized by R. Edward Freeman. This idea argues that a corporation's duty extends beyond just shareholders to include employees, customers, suppliers, even the community. And it's a compelling idea. That tension between what we want companies to be and what they actually are is at the heart of today's conversation. Part of the problem, I think, is a notion that we carry about how change happens. We love to imagine progress as this romantic story of brave gestures and heroic leaders and enlightened institutions. But if you peel back the layers of history, you'd find something different. Social advances almost always take root when they become practical necessities, when performance, survival, or even credibility demand them. The grand gestures that we remember and we romanticize, that typically comes much later. They're how we like to remember change, but they aren't usually what sparks it. So let's take the story of Jackie Robinson. Now, the myth is that baseball integrated because one brave man stood tall, and that his courage, matched by one executive's vision, broke the color line. But the truth is more pragmatic. Branch Rickey, the Dodgers general manager at the time, wasn't some crusading activist. He was a shrewd executive acting under shareholder primacy. His duty was to field the best possible team and make money for his club owners. Rickey saw an untapped pool of talent in the Negro Leagues that his rivals were ignoring. And while their owners the owners of the other teams, tied themselves to the color line, Rickey saw a competitive advantage waiting to be seized. Jackie Robinson, for his part, was a perfect candidate because he had the temperament and the fortitude to withstand what everybody knew was coming, right? It was going to be a difficult transition. But these personal attributes were second to a critical fact. He was also a world-class baseball player, and Robinson delivered. Hit .297 his rookie year, won Rookie of the Year, and became league MVP just a couple of seasons later. The market, the fans in the stands, the owners across the league were never clamoring for integration, but they did want wins. Robinson just happened to give them both. Had that experiment failed, it likely would have been abandoned overnight. His story is not primarily one of moral leadership. It's one of competitive calculation that was validated by excellence. I've got another example for you. The integration of the military here in the United States, because the same pattern holds true. President Truman's Executive Order 9981, which desegregated the military in 1948. Let's take a look at that. The myth is that the integration was an act of enlightened conscience, a moral stand from top-down leadership. But the reality? By the end of World War II, segregated Black units, most famously the Tuskegee Airmen, had proven their valor in combat. You see, the military's mission is victory. Segregation had made that mission harder. The Black soldiers' excellence revealed that exclusion wasn't just unjust, it was inefficient. And with the dawn of the Cold War, America could not afford inefficiency. The stakes were survival, and the performance forced the institution to adapt. Truman's order wasn't just a gesture, it was an operational necessity. What about Rosie the Riveter? We all know the poster, sleeve rolled up, flexing her arm, declaring, "We can do it." Now, today, Rosie is remembered as a symbol of women's empowerment, but the infusion of women into male-dominated labor roles wasn't born of a moral awakening. It was born out of a labor shortage. With millions of men drafted into service during World War II, factories needed workers desperately to keep the war machine running. Women didn't get those jobs because society suddenly decided they were deserving. They got them because the economy couldn't function without them. But once they were in, they excelled. They proved they could weld and rivet and manage assembly lines just as well as a man, and that their performance shifted the culture. While the excellence of these women is what kept the door open, it was the operational necessity that initially opened the door. Even the Civil Rights Act of 1964, one of America's most celebrated moral victories, was shaped by pragmatic forces more so than high ideals. Again, the myth is that the president and Congress finally had a change of heart, that after years of marches and sit-ins, conscience prevailed. But the reality is far more complicated. By the 1960s, the Cold War was in full swing. And every time Soviet propaganda replayed images of segregated schools or peaceful protests being attacked by police dogs, it undercut America's credibility as the leader of the free world. Civil rights wasn't just a domestic issue. It was a geopolitical liability. President Lyndon Johnson understood this. Now, yes, he spoke passionately of justice, and I believe he was sincere. But he also knew that America's credibility abroad was at stake. Passing civil rights legislation wasn't only about righting wrongs. It was about being able to compete on the global stage. And what happened at home? Once those doors were opened, the dire predictions of segregationists never came true. Their doomsday scenarios collapsed under the weight of a stark reality. Not only could we operate as a more inclusive society, but that we were actually better for it. You see the pattern, right? Necessity opens the door, performance keeps it open, and together they drive lasting change. The moral part of the story, the romantic notion that we love so much, well, that tends to come later when we get to retell how the progress was made. But history shows us a simple truth. Performance makes moral case undeniable. And when an institution acts in its own best interest, that impulse can and should be harnessed for change when the opportunity arises organically. And that brings us to today. Let's think about Bud Light and its partnership with Dylan Mulvaney. In many ways, this was an attempt to put stakeholder theory into practice, to appeal to a new community, to signal broader social purpose. And on the surface, it looks like a brave, principled stand. So why did it fail? Well, ask yourself, what is Bud Light's value proposition? For most of its core consumers, an ice-cold Bud is an escape from exactly the kind of cultural debates that this campaign was wading into. Supporters of the campaign praised Bud Light for its progressive stance. But what they didn't do is go to the store and buy their product. And if market research had demonstrated that the people most likely to purchase would also be ones to reject the campaign, then making that stand at the expense of company performance is not courage. It's category error. Because when activism isn't tethered to performance, when it doesn't deliver excellence or expand markets, the company pays the price, which is what Bud Light painfully discovered. The market proves time and time again that when stakeholder interests don't align with shareholder returns, it's going to be the latter that wins. Let's take a look at Cracker Barrel. In recent years, the company has dipped its toe into DEI initiatives, from Pride Month promotions to inclusive marketing. Now, to me, these gestures look like well-intended attempts to signal openness, show cultural awareness, and move the company forward, which all sound like sensible and sound corporate strategies. But here's the problem. Cracker Barrel's core brand promise isn't cultural leadership. It's comfort food. It's country decor and nostalgia. People go there to step back into something familiar, not to address something contentious. And when those campaigns landed, yes, I'm sure that there were people who applauded the effort. But the people who actually spend their dollars there, they rejected it. And again, the market rewarded the rejection. The point I'm trying to make here is that when CEOs respect and respond the customer, that isn't cowardice or some type of moral failing. That's pragmatic leadership. It's the job they were hired to do. Because the market is neutral. It doesn't punish or reward morality. It punishes or rewards alignment, which is why it is an unfair ask to put the burden of cultural change in the hands of corporate leaders. This is where I want to sharpen my point. When activists take their fight to the boardroom, they don't just set the companies up for failure. They risk delegitimizing their own cause because it suggests that they can't win where it actually matters, in government, in education, and in the daily choices of citizens. It's unfair to expect a CEO whose job is to maximize return to become a substitute for political action or civic debate or cultural persuasion. That is not what a corporation is built for. If a company chooses not to take a stand, but instead pursues a strategy that aligns with its fiduciary duty, that is not moral cowardice. That's the system working as designed. And if you disagree with that outcome, your fight isn't with the CEO, who is simply responding to market forces. It's with the market itself. Because the real levels of change live in three places. Live in government, the laws we pass, the policies we enforce. It's with education, the norms we teach the next generation. And it's with citizenship, collectively what we tolerate, reward, and reinforce every day. That's where the heavy lifting belongs, not in quarterly reports of corporations. Well, I know my argument is seemingly landing squarely in the shareholder primacy camp, and that's mostly true. But it's not that I reject stakeholder theory outright. I just reject the idea that the two live in opposition. From my view, every goal of stakeholder theory is underpinned by company viability. And in that sense, they work in tandem, not against each other. So let's stop asking companies to save us. If change is real, it should succeed in classrooms and ballots and communities first. The market will follow us there, but it'll never lead us there. It's the responsibility of you and I, not of CEOs. Thank you for listening to this fourth branch note. Our mission is to ensure every voice finds value in the arena of public discourse. Did we miss an angle? Do you have a suggestion, comment, or perspective you'd like to share? Or would you like to perhaps guest on the show? We'd love to hear from you. Find us at thefourthbranchpodcast.com or search for The Fourth Branch on most social media. Subscribe wherever you podcast, and let's keep the conversation going.